The hip-hop world is buzzing again because Suge Knight just dropped a claim so wild it could flip everything we thought we knew about Tupac, Snoop Dogg, and the legacy of Death Row Records. What do you think? Could Suge be telling the truth? Or is this just another prison tale? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear what side you're on. And if you love digging into stories that shake up hip-hop history, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next twist.
I'm quite sure I am Death Row. Suge Knight is Death Row. So I'm quite sure, before it's said and done, all eyes on me and Makaveli out of Pac and Snoop to come back.
Where I'm going with this, Snoop, stop letting these people use you.
When Suge Knight speaks, the hip-hop world stops to listen. Even from behind prison walls, his voice carries the weight of history, menace, and unfinished business. On a recent episode of his Collect Call podcast, Suge turned his attention to Snoop Dogg, and what he said left the entire industry shaken. This wasn't a casual diss track or a bitter old-school rant. Suge claimed that Snoop's time at the top is nearly over, and the reason isn't some fading career or bad business deal. According to Suge, the threat comes from none other than Tupac Shakur himself. Yes, the same Tupac the world has believed dead since 1996. Suge said outright that Tupac is alive and preparing a return. Not a return for music, not a nostalgic comeback tour, but a return for vengeance. And at the top of Tupac's alleged list of betrayers, Snoop Dogg. The weight of those words can't be overstated. For nearly 3 decades, Tupac's death has been considered one of hip-hop's greatest tragedies and mysteries. Suge, who was sitting next to Tupac in that BMW on the night of the Las Vegas shooting, has always been central to the story. But now, from a prison phone, he's rewriting the entire narrative, turning suspicion directly onto his former protege. Claim sent shockwaves across social media, reigniting long-dormant debates, sparking headlines, and forcing fans to reconsider what they thought they knew about one of music's darkest nights. If Suge is telling the truth, Snoop isn't just a hip-hop icon. He might be a man running out of time.
I like this the whole flight, hoping one of them come with me so I could stab out everybody on this mother.
If Suge Knight's latest words sound unbelievable, they fall right in line with decades of rumors that have refused to die since Tupac's shooting in 1996. For years, fans, insiders, and even supposed witnesses have sworn that the rapper somehow survived that infamous Vegas night. The story has become bigger than hip-hop itself, a cultural obsession built on blurred photos, whispered sightings, and cryptic clues. Some claim Tupac was spotted in Havana, ducking into a cafe, blending in with the locals as if he'd been there for years. Others insist he lives in Central America, sipping rum and growing a beard, unrecognizable, but still unmistakable. These sightings always surface just often enough to keep the myth alive. And then there's Michael Nice, Tupac's former bodyguard, whose own testimony took the theories into overdrive. Nice once claimed that he helped stage Tupac's escape, swapping bodies, bribing hospital staff, and even getting Fidel Castro's approval to pull it off. That story sounded like something out of a Hollywood script. But when Nice mysteriously died in 2018, just days after promising new evidence, fans clung to his claims even harder. Add to that the cryptic details: an autopsy photo many call staged, a cremator who vanished right after the job, and Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, once saying her son chose to leave quietly. Then there's the Makaveli persona, an alias Tupac embraced, inspired by Machiavelli's idea of faking death to defeat enemies. His album cover even read, "Exit Tupac, enter Makaveli." For believers, that was never just art, it was a confession. To understand why Suge Knight points the finger at Snoop Dogg, you have to look back at the tense final days of Tupac's life. On the surface, Pac and Snoop were brothers in arms, 2 of death row's brightest stars riding the wave of West Coast dominance. But behind closed doors, cracks were forming, and their friendship was unraveling fast. In interviews years later, Snoop admitted that the two were no longer on good terms just days before the Vegas shooting. "One week we were best friends, and 2 days before he wouldn't even speak to me," Snoop confessed. The rift stemmed from Pac's escalating war with the East Coast, a feud that pushed him to drop vicious diss tracks and double down on confrontation. Snoop, however, didn't want that smoke. He publicly praised Biggie and Puffy on the radio, an act Tupac saw as outright betrayal. Even when Tupac played him "Hit 'Em Up," one of the most brutal diss records in hip-hop history, Snoop brushed it off, calling it a come-and-go record that only added more problems. To Pac, that sounded like cowardice. To Snoop, it was maturity. But either way, it drove a wedge between them at the worst possible time. Insiders, like former Outlaws member Napoleon, later accused Snoop of being two-faced, praising Tupac in public while undermining him in private. Others whispered that Snoop resented losing the spotlight when Tupac arrived at death row and became the center of attention. Whether jealousy, fear, or survival, the trust between them shattered. And now, decades later, Suge's claim forces us to ask, was Snoop just cautious, or was he playing a deeper game?
So we made the business decision to be cool with each other. Because I don't hate him, and he don't hate me.
When Snoop Dogg proudly announced that he had acquired Death Row Records, fans celebrated it as a full-circle moment. The label that made him a star was back in his hands, ready to be reshaped into a modern empire. But to Suge Knight, the man who built Death Row from the ground up, this wasn't a victory, it was fraud. From his prison cell, Suge has repeatedly challenged Snoop's ownership. "Show me the paperwork," he demanded during his podcast, claiming that Snoop's acquisition was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. According to Suge, the real story isn't about business deals or catalogs. It's about rewriting history and erasing the people who built the label. Suge's attacks go beyond legal disputes. He accuses Snoop of destroying the legacy of Death Row, calling his new releases flops and mocking the relaunch as a disappointment. In Suge's eyes, Snoop isn't reviving a legendary brand, he's tarnishing it. For Suge, this isn't just business, it's personal. The bitterness runs deep. Suge feels erased from the empire he created, watching from behind bars as Snoop rebrands Death Row into something polished and family-friendly. For Suge, the label was never about nostalgia. It was about power, loyalty, and respect. To see it in Snoop's hands, stripped of its edge, feels like betrayal all over again. And that's why his warning carries such venom. Suge isn't simply questioning paperwork. He's suggesting that Snoop's rise wasn't clean, that backroom deals and betrayals paved the way. It's a narrative that turns Snoop from a survivor into a suspect, right as Suge hints that Tupac may return to demand answers. Among the most explosive whispers tied to Snoop Dogg's survival at death row is the claim that he may have struck a deal with federal authorities back in the 1990s. It's a theory that's floated around for years, mostly in the underground, corners of hip-hop discussions, but Suge Knight's new warnings have brought it back to the surface. The rumor suggests that as Death Row's empire began to collapse, under the weight of lawsuits, federal investigations, and street wars, Snoop was under immense pressure. Suge's control of the label was tightening. Rival crews were circling, and the FBI had their eyes on everything. According to some insiders, Snoop made a choice: cooperate quietly in order to protect himself. The implications are staggering. If true, it would mean that Snoop's reputation as the smooth-talking, laid-back survivor wasn't luck at all, it was strategy. It would suggest that while others fell victim to prison sentences, bullets, or financial ruin, Snoop navigated the chaos by cutting deals behind the scenes. Suge never spells this out directly. He knows where the legal lines are, but his cryptic language in recent podcasts fuels the speculation. He says there's a lot of explaining to do, his words heavy with suggestion. Fans immediately connected the dots. Was this the hidden key to how Snoop avoided the same fate that swallowed so many others at death row? If these rumors hold even a shred of truth, they add another layer of betrayal to Suge's accusations. It would mean Snoop wasn't just cautious, he may have actively played both sides, ensuring his survival at the cost of everyone else.
This is a 5.5-hour flight. Don't nobody say one word to me. Not one word. Just having conversations and doing all kinds of things, saying nothing.
One of the most fascinating pieces of this puzzle is Tupac's Makaveli persona, which has fueled conspiracy theories for decades. Inspired by the writings of Niccolò Machiavelli, who famously advised rulers to fake their own death to outsmart enemies, Tupac didn't just study the philosophy, he wove it into his art. His 1996 album, The Don Illuminati, the 7-Day Theory, released under the name Makaveli, seemed to drip with coded messages. Fans have long pointed to the album cover, which reads, "Exit Tupac, enter Makaveli," as more than symbolism. To them, it was a direct statement of intent. Rearranging the letters of Makaveli to spell "Am Alive K" became part of hip-hop folklore. Even Tupac's lyrics, filled with references to resurrection, revenge, and playing the long game, took on new meaning after his death. Pac Shakur, Tupac's mother, only deepened the mystery when she said her son chose to leave quietly. Was that a grieving mother's metaphor or a subtle confirmation? Add in the bizarre details, the questionable autopsy, the cremator who vanished, the coroner's conflicting report, and it's no wonder people suspect a staged disappearance. For Suge Knight, the Makaveli myth is ammunition. Each time he hints that Tupac is alive, he breathes new life into the legend. And now, by tying Snoop Dogg to Tupac's supposed list of betrayers, Suge reframes the Makaveli strategy not as an escape, but as a setup for payback. If Tupac really did fake his death, it wasn't just to disappear, it was to return on his terms and to confront those he believed sold him out.
As if I was scared. Death Row looked at me as like a traitor.
Suge Knight's voice might be echoing from a prison phone, but make no mistake, his words still cut deep into the heart of hip-hop. His latest accusations against Snoop Dogg don't just reopen old wounds, they threaten to completely rewrite how the world remembers Death Row Records and the icons who shaped it. For decades, Death Row has been seen as both a monument and a graveyard, a place that launched legends, but also consumed them. Now, with Suge's claims, it feels like the ghosts of that empire are stirring again. At the center of it all is Snoop Dogg. For years, he has worn the crown of the laid-back survivor, the West Coast icon who rose above the chaos, reinvented himself, and eventually circled back to own the very label that gave him his start. His story has been celebrated as one of resilience and redemption, but Suge's accusations twist that narrative, turning survival into suspicion. Did Snoop endure because he was the smartest in the room, or because he struck deals in the shadows, betraying the very people who once called him brother? The question gains even more weight when tied to Tupac's legacy. If the whispers are true, if Tupac really is alive, biding his time, preparing to return, then Snoop isn't just a survivor. He becomes the alleged betrayer, the man at the top of Tupac's dirty list. Imagine what that would mean. Every nostalgic moment, from his Super Bowl performance to his talk show appearances, suddenly overshadowed by a decades-old betrayal. His carefully built image of peace, humor, and family-friendly branding would crumble under the weight of suspicion and payback. But even if Tupac never emerges from the shadows, Suge's words have already done damage. They remind fans of the unanswered questions, the staged-looking autopsy, the vanished cremator, Pac Shakur's cryptic remarks, the Makaveli codes, that make Tupac's story feel less like a closed chapter and more like an open wound. And in reopening that wound, Suge points directly at Snoop, daring the world to reconsider the role he played during Death Row's darkest days. For Snoop, the stakes couldn't be higher. His entire career rests on the image of a man who outlasted the chaos, who learned from the violence of the past and transformed into a symbol of hip-hop longevity. But if Suge's version of events takes hold, then Snoop's legacy becomes something far darker. Not resilience, but ruthlessness. Not luck, but betrayal. In the end, this isn't just about Suge, Snoop, or Tupac. It's about hip-hop's biggest unanswered question. How much of what we believe is history is actually myth? How many of the stories that shaped the culture were built on secrets, deals, and betrayals hidden from public view? And that's why this story refuses to die. Whether Tupac is alive or not, whether Snoop is guilty or innocent, the uncertainty keeps the world hooked. Suge Knight's words remind us that in hip-hop, the past never really stays buried. The ghosts of death row still walk, and until the truth comes out, every player in that saga lives under their shadow. So now the question is yours. If Tupac really does return, will it destroy Snoop Dogg or finally expose the darkest secrets of hip-hop? Once and for all,